Hi, you're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. I'm Gary Zacharias. I'm going back for a second look to a big book. It's called the Baker Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics. And I may have said this before. This is not necessarily a volume that you're going to dip into and just spend all afternoon reading, one thing after another. It's pretty serious, heavy going, and so I catch myself picking a topic and whatever it is, and that takes up a lot of my time because it gets pretty deep, and sometimes I say, my head is hurting, my brain is hurting, I'll stop and go do something else. But I like the book a lot. I mean, if you want something that's in-depth on just a wide range of topics, this is it. For this podcast, I thought I'd do something a little different. I'm going to look at two different parts of this encyclopedia. It's arranged alphabetically. And I want to do something on Harold Kushner and Sigmund Freud and put the two of them together. And I know that sounds odd because they didn't write in the same time period, but I just thought it was interesting that both of them, I was flipping through the book here and I thought about both of them challenged the traditional Judeo-Christian view of God. So that's going to be what will organize this today. So let's take a look at Kushner first of all. He put out this book years back called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And he did have a second one, When All You've Wanted Isn't Enough. And he challenges Christianity at several major points. So I wanted to go through that briefly, show you some of the problems with it, according to Norm Geisler. And then we'll take a look at Sigmund Freud, go back a little further. So Kushner was late 20th century. He was an American Jewish rabbi. And they don't mention it here, but I think his son had died, and it made him kind of rethink everything to do with his Jewish faith and his view of God and things like that. So the big issue, right? If you're going to take Kushner and say, what's his view of God? One word, limited. There's one God, so he buys into the Judeo-Christian view, but this God is limited in power and perfection. So he's limited because of us. He wants us to be able to do some things, right? So we got to be involved. And he's limited because of his nature. So even, this is a quote from the book, even God has a hard time keeping chaos in check and limiting the damage that evil can do. So God tries to, what does he do then? So he can't cause tragedies. I guess that's good. But he can't really prevent tragedies either. So what does he do? He helps by inspiring people to help. That's the quote. Helps by inspiring people to help. So God can't control the world. He can't control humans. But he's the divine power urging people to grow and to reach and to dare. And that part about grow, reach, and dare, that's also from the book. So who's God for him? He's a God of love, but he's not a God of power. Now, what does he say about human beings? Well, he's really big on evolution. So he says humanity is an evolved result of God's creation. God's good. Well, if he's good, then he made mankind good. So when the Bible describes Adam and Eve taking that fruit, they didn't fall downward. They fell upward, according to Kushner. It was a moment of progress for the human race, not catastrophe. It was a leap forward in the evolutionary process, right? We're making our way up to where we are today. He writes that God had things in mind when he arranged for human beings to evolve. So evolution is God at work. Evolution is the means, according to Kushner, through which God expresses his creativity. And the world is changing, of course, if you believe evolution and all, sure. But there are things about this world that even God can't change. God's hands are tied. One way, they're tied by the laws of nature. So we can't really ask God for a miracle. Prayer doesn't put us in touch with a supernatural God, says Kushner. So prayer puts us in touch with other people who are going to share our concerns and our values. So prayer has value, but it has a different kind of value than we normally think of. The world is also irrational, he says. There's really no ultimate meaning to anything that happens. There's no reason why some suffer and others don't. Evil is real, he believes. He says the world is unjust, and we just have to adjust to that. We can't blame God for the evil that's out there. We need to forgive God. So what's the problem of evil? What's the solution for this problem? We have to forgive God, quote, for not making a better world, to reach out to the people around us, and to go on living despite it all. So he then talks about ethics. He says, a religion that defines morality as obedience to its commands is appropriate to children. Now that's Kushner talking. And immature people, and may have been appropriate to humankind as a whole when civilization was immature. Oh, so did you get that? So you don't want to define morality as obedience to the commands of God, right? That's for kids, and it's for an immature civilization. But if you're unquestioningly obedient, then what are you going to be? A perpetual child? Well, what would be higher than that? So for Kushner, a higher level of ethical maturity is achieved by people who understand that rules don't come down from on high. We make the rules. People like ourselves, we make the rules, and we test them and we perfect them over the course of time, and we can be changed by people like themselves. So being good for Kushner is not all about just obeying rules. It means sharing the responsibility of making good rules that would be fair for everybody. What about the future? What's his view on the future? Well, as to life after death, he's uncertain. He thinks immortality is only a hope. The important thing, he says, is since we don't know what's going on in the future, we've got to live in the now. If you live in the present with integrity, you'd have no fear of dying. So heaven and hell are here. They're on earth. This is what he believes about heaven. It's having learned to do and enjoy the things that make us human, the things that only human beings can do. So what's hell? He says the worst kind of hell I can imagine is not fire and brimstone. The worst hell is the realization that you could have been a real human being. Well, at the end then, Geisler gives some of the positives and some of the problems with Kushner's views. So he says, for one thing, he does have truth in here. He acknowledges that there is a problem of evil. Yeah, the evil is real. It's not the pantheistic idea that just denies the reality. He says, there is real evil out there. He also has experienced some physical suffering, so he's not detached. He is sensitive to the existence of suffering. And so I think that's good, that's legit. He also recognizes the problem in divine intervention. And this is hard for us to understand, but I think it's true. Geisler says, looking at the human condition, God can't do everything. There are some limits on his divine intervention. For example, he can't violate the human freedom he gave to us, beings made in his image. So performing a miracle that's contrary to moral freedom, that's an impossibility for God. So if God consistently and over again intervened into this world, it upset the very laws of nature that make physical and moral life possible. Well, at the very end of that section, then he talks about some of the objections and weaknesses, and so I'm going to add a little bit to it as well. So first, he says this is called finite Godism, the idea that God is limited. He says that's without foundation. Yeah, I mean, I think about, would I worship, would I care about a God who has limits? I mean, that immediately makes you worry and be suspicious that he could do anything that you would ask him. I think you'd live in a constant state of fear and confusion trying to worship a God like that. The conception of evil is inadequate, and the denial of the supernatural is unfounded. He denies that. His denial of immortality is contrary to evidence. And it said, with that denial, the whole case crumbles. Because, what is he saying? Kushner is saying, we have wrongs that are in this life, and this life is over, that's the end, so evil will never be fixed. But that's not the Christian view. The Christian view says, yes, things look unfair and they look bad now, but that's not the end. That's not the finality of it. It's going to go on, and things will be fixed, but not right now in this world. So that's contrary to the Christian view. So that gives you an idea of Harold Kushner. Well, what about Sigmund Freud? What are some of the challenges that he makes? Of course, he's the father of psychoanalysis, he was a really influential atheist, maybe the number one. And his view of religion has ended up being pretty widely accepted as a rationale if you want to disbelieve in God. So he wrote on psychology, of course, but he was also occupied with religion. He wrote something called Totem and Taboo and Moses and Monotheism. But they said his most influential work to try to undermine belief in God was a book in 1927 called The Future of an Illusion. So, first of all, Freud did find some positive things about religion. He thought there was some truth there, and some religion may all be true, but it can't be disproved. And he said it would be helpful if it was true. And I said we do have a feeling of dependence that religion lets us know we were dependent on God. It's provided a lot of comfort for people, and part of the goals of religion are wonderful, like brotherhood and easing suffering of good people, and it's been a huge part of culture. So despite these benefits, now you'd say, well, those all sound pretty good, but he believed religion has to be rejected as authoritarian. You got to reject it in its form. It's unnecessary. It's inadequate. His whole thing is that it seemed to him that religion was founded on this illusion, this dream of wish fulfillment. It's something that we wish to be true, but we don't have any basis for trust just beyond our wish. So we want there to be a God. We want there to be a life after this life. So he says, Geisler says in a way, what Freud is saying is that God is a childhood neurosis that we don't ever outgrow, that we kind of want a heavenly security blanket. He said, Geisler says we want a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But he said that doesn't mean there is one. So here are the reasons Freud says religion is harmful. It arises from the desire for a cosmic comforter. It started during a primitive period of human development. It drains energy from the drive to solve world problems. It's selfish. It's impatient. It wants a reward when we die. It may contribute to a passionate, irrational nature because it represses sexual development. It keeps people in a state of immaturity and childhood. Its adherents are closed-minded. It's not needed. Humanity now has science to control the world, and we can get along without religion. It's not brought personal or social satisfaction after all these years of effort. It says, so those are the main things that he says about it, and I'll get to some other things that Geisler has to say, but I was just looking at these items here. It arises from the desire or wish for a cosmic comforter. Well, I would say take a look at Christianity. Is it a comforting religion? Partially. But if you're going to create a religion, would you create the idea of a hell? Would you create the idea of a God who has perfect standards? No, I don't think so. Would you create Jesus who came into the world and lashed out at the people who are trying to be religious, like the Pharisees? Secondly, it says, this is back to Freud, it originated during a primitive period of human development. Well, so what? Right? It doesn't matter when something started. It's what does it say and what does it believe? Number three, it drains energy to solve the world's problems. That's not true, at least as far as Christianity goes. It's the Christians of the world who've, from the very beginning, they took care of the sick, they took care of the outcasts, they took care of the kids that nobody wanted. It was Christianity that started universities. They solved a lot of problems in this world. They've set up places like Red Cross and things like that. I mean, Christianity has been involved. It's rolled its sleeves up, and it has the drive to solve the world's problems. It was Christians that got rid of slavery in the Western world. It says, the other complaint, he says it's selfish. Well, again, that's not Christianity. Christianity says we're all beggars. Nobody's better than anybody else, and we need a helping hand from God. We can't save ourselves. That doesn't sound selfish to me. It's saying, I can't do it. I depend on God. He says, keeps people in a state of childhood and immaturity. Really, some of the most sophisticated people in the world have been Christians. Its adherents are closed-minded. They do not willingly give it up under any circumstances. I don't know where he gets that, closed-minded. I don't think that's the case at all. Anyway, let's get back here to him. What's an evaluation that Geisler comes up with? He says, it seems like his rejection of religion seems prejudiced, unreasonable, and even cruel. He says, he says, well, he doesn't even care that maybe it's the tenets of the faith are true, and he puts down all those things just to go after it again. He assumes that the desire for satisfaction is wrong. It's like saying, well, the desire for food and water would be wrong. He assumes that all religions involve the desire for comfort, but some are not comfortable, which is what I was saying before. I mean, Christianity is not a comfortable religion. He also says that cultural ignorance of our ancestors doesn't automatically disqualify the religion. Said one can be educated by a secular culture away from a thoughtful consideration of religious things. He also says instead of draining energy from caring about the world, religion has stimulated the highest help. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Regarding human passions, it says experience shows true religion does not contribute to uncontrolled passion. Right? Religion controls human passions. Yeah, I'd say Christianity does that. He says the failure of a lot that don't use religion right, that doesn't invalidate it. He says committing adultery doesn't disprove the value of marriage. So I think that's another good point there. Well, I'm wrapping up here at the end here. Said, what about his claim that religion is an illusion? He said, an illusion is something based only on wish. And so apparently what Freud was saying, the belief in God has that characteristic, so therefore it's a wish. But he says you could challenge that. Not everybody who believes in God do so because they wish for a cosmic comforter. Some find God because they thirst for reality. Many are searching for truth, not just because they're concerned about feeling good. Let me interrupt here again. I think about J. Warner Wallace. He said his life was pretty good without God. He had a family, he had a good job, and he was a decent person. Now, he said he came to Christianity not out of a need for it, but because he believed it was true. And he said it hasn't made his life necessarily easier, but it was true. There are many discomforting dimensions to the Christian belief in God. Yeah, that was what I was saying before. Here's what Geisler says. God's not only a father who provides, he's also a judge who punishes. Christians believe in hell, and yet they don't really want this to be true. And then I thought this was really interesting. Geisler says Freud may have it backwards. Maybe our images of earthly fathers are patterned after God rather than the reverse. So God has created us in his image. So maybe the Christian's belief in God is not based on a desire to create God. Rather, maybe the atheist's belief that there is no God is based on the desire to kill the Father. That's interesting. So he's saying it may be the atheist who's doing the wish fulfilling. They don't want there to be a God. So it says the mere human desire for God is not the only basis for believing that God exists. There are good reasons for believing that he exists. Yeah, exactly. And we've covered this a lot of times in different podcasts. Things like, why is there something rather than nothing? That's the cosmological argument. Where'd the universe come from? That's a good argument for God. What about the argument from design? Why does everything seem to be so perfectly balanced for life here? What about DNA? Where do you get information like DNA? What about the moral argument? Where do we get the idea that there are some oughts, things we should do, things we shouldn't do? If it's just up to human nature, hey, then everybody's got their own system. But we don't believe that. We think there are certain objective facts. Where did consciousness come from? I mean, there are all sorts of ways that you could argue for the existence of God. At the end, then, Geisler says it may be that Freud's belief that there is no God is itself an illusion. If one does not wish to obey God, it's easier to believe that no God exists. Yeah. And he says at the very end, if one's living in sin and rebellion against God, it's comforting to believe that neither he nor hell exists. And he gives a couple of verses to take a look there. So I'll leave these with you. Psalm 14:1 and Romans 1:18. So there you go. There are two people that have impacted the world. And because of our fallen nature, I think they've gotten a lot of play. People like what they have to say. Well, that's it for this time. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Talk to you later.